What if I told you that one of the most quietly searched questions among older men today isn't about cholesterol or arthritis, but about penis size? It's true, and the shocking part is that most of the advice men find online isn't just misleading, it can actually be dangerous. My name is Dr. James. I'm a board-certified urologist with over 3 decades of experience helping men over 60 maintain their health, confidence, and quality of life. Throughout my career, I've seen how aging can affect not only the body, but also how a man feels about himself. And yes, that includes concerns about size. Here's what most people don't realize. Many men who worry about their size are already within the normal range. But science has now confirmed something remarkable. Even without surgery, there are safe, proven ways to increase length, if you know what to look for. In today's video, you'll discover 4 methods backed by clinical studies, the surprising role of therapy, and which surgical options you should approach with caution. And stay with me, because before we finish, I'll share the one approach my patients have seen the most success with. No scalpels, no gimmicks, just results. Before we dive into the science of what actually works, we need to start with the deeper truth. The part most men never say out loud, but quietly carry with them every day. Because until we understand the emotional weight behind the question, we can't fully appreciate the power of the answer. Let's talk honestly about something most men never say out loud, especially as they get older. The truth is, concern about penis size doesn't simply disappear with age. In fact, for many men over 60, the emotional weight of that concern often becomes heavier, not lighter. It's not just about appearance anymore, it's tied to deeper issues like confidence, identity, masculinity, and the fear of losing connection, both physical and emotional, with a partner. And yet, even with all the medical conversations we now have around aging, this one topic is still buried in silence. That silence is why we're here today. I'm not here to offer gimmicks or empty promises. You won't hear me talk about miracle creams, suspicious pills, or risky shortcuts. Instead, I want to give you what has been clearly documented in medical research, real solutions rooted in science. These are the methods that urologists have studied and published in peer-reviewed journals. These are the approaches that have brought results, especially for men over 60 who are dealing with quiet insecurities and lingering questions. Let's start with the most important truth. Most men who worry about their size are not actually small. That may come as a surprise, but the numbers tell a clear story. In one of the largest surveys of heterosexual men, over 50,000 participants, more than half of the men said they were unhappy with their penis size. But when their female partners were asked, 85% said they were perfectly satisfied. The disconnect is striking, and it reveals something important. The issue isn't always about anatomy, it's about perception. In fact, the average erect penis length, based on worldwide clinical measurements, is approximately 5.2 inches, or 13.2 centimeters. Anything above 2.9 inches, or 7.5 centimeters, is considered medically normal. And only a very small percentage of men, around 0.14%, fall below that line, a condition known as micropenis. So why do so many men still feel inadequate? Because of something called small penis anxiety. It's a recognized form of body dysmorphia, an obsessive worry about not measuring up, and for some men it becomes a daily source of distress. They may compare themselves to unrealistic images, internalize cultural expectations, and quietly wonder if they are somehow less of a man. This anxiety can bleed into every corner of life: relationships, intimacy, self-esteem, even physical health. But here's the encouraging part. Even if your size is technically normal, science has shown that there are safe, gradual, and proven ways to increase length. These methods won't transform you overnight, and they require patience, but they work. And for older men, they can offer not just physical results, but emotional reassurance and renewed confidence. So that's where we'll go next. In the following sections, I'll walk you through 4 non-surgical, evidence-backed techniques you can trust, along with 3 surgical procedures that do exist, but which come with very real risks. You deserve clarity. You deserve options grounded in truth. And above all, you deserve to feel good in your body at any age. Now let's begin with the first and most important category. 4 non-surgical techniques that have been scientifically studied, clinically documented, and proven to help men enhance length safely, especially later in life. 1. Psychological counseling. The first step, often the most powerful. If there's one thing I've learned after decades of working with older men, it's this. The mind is just as important as the body. And when it comes to concerns about size, it's often the mind that carries the heaviest burden. That's why psychological counseling, though often overlooked, is not just the first step. It's often the most transformative. I've sat across from men in their 60s, 70s, even 80s who have spent years feeling ashamed of their bodies. Not because of what a doctor told them, not because of any real measurement, but because of a quiet, lingering belief that they just don't measure up. That belief, unchecked, starts to wear down confidence. It seeps into intimacy. It turns quiet doubts into full-blown shame, and sometimes it becomes a constant mental loop, especially after retirement when men have more time alone with their thoughts. But here's what's incredible. When these same men are guided through professional counseling by someone who understands the emotional weight of male identity and self-perception, they often experience a shift that no device or surgery can ever deliver. They begin to separate truth from fear. They learn that their value isn't tied to a number on a ruler, and they stop chasing a version of manhood defined by comparison, fantasy, or shame. There's real science behind this. Studies have shown that men who go through psychological therapy for concerns about penile size often abandon the idea of physical enhancement entirely. Not because they've given up, but because they've finally come to peace with their bodies. Their anxiety fades, their relationships improve, they begin to reconnect with their partners and with themselves in ways that had long been clouded by silent insecurity. And I'll be honest, I've seen more lasting satisfaction come from a few honest therapy sessions than from months of mechanical stretching or risky procedures. Because when the heart is at ease, the mind stops chasing impossible ideals. I understand that for some of you, the idea of therapy might feel foreign or even uncomfortable. Many of us were raised to push through pain, not talk about it. But there is nothing weak about taking control of your mental health. In fact, there is strength in confronting your fears head-on, and wisdom in understanding that the problem may not be your size, but the story you've been telling yourself for years. If you're watching this and quietly nodding, thinking that sounds like me, I urge you to start here. Find a counselor who specializes in men's health or sexual wellness. Speak honestly. Unpack the weight you've carried, because the moment you stop running from it is often the moment you begin to feel free. Now, for those who still wish to pursue physical improvement, because let's face it, for some men, that desire remains, we're going to explore the only device that clinical science has shown to truly lengthen the penis over time. And it may surprise you just how effective it can be if used with discipline and patience. 2. Penile traction devices. The only device that works. Of all the questions I get asked by older men, the most common one is this: Doctor, is there anything I can do to actually increase my length without surgery? And the honest answer is yes, but it requires patience, commitment, and the right tool. That tool is a penile traction device, and unlike so many products you'll find online or in advertisements, this one is backed by real science. I remember one patient, Harold, in his early 70s. He was a retired engineer, practical, logical, no nonsense. He came to me not because he was desperate, but because he was curious. He said, if something actually works, I'll give it my best shot, but I don't have time for tricks. I appreciated his straightforwardness. So I told him about penile traction therapy, the one method shown in peer-reviewed studies to create real, measurable results. Here's how it works. The device applies a gentle, consistent stretching force to the penis over time. It sounds simple, and in theory it is, but it's not a quick fix. Most men who see results use the device for several hours a day, every day, for at least 3 to 6 months. It's a slow process. But just like how braces realign teeth gradually, traction therapy encourages tissue expansion through a process called cellular proliferation. Over time, that leads to actual lengthening, both in the flaccid and stretched states. In the most cited studies, men gained up to 2 centimeters in length, about 3/4 of an inch. That may not sound like a lot, but for many men, that small increase brings a huge boost in confidence. More importantly, it's one of the only methods that has shown consistent results without the risks of surgery or unregulated injections. What makes this method truly effective is consistency. You can't use it once in a while and expect miracles. It's for men who are serious, who are willing to put in the time daily, and who understand that improvement is a process, not a promise. But the reward isn't just physical, it's psychological. I've had patients come back months later not just with measurable gains, but with a renewed sense of ownership over their health and identity. Of course, it's important to follow the manufacturer's guidelines and consult with the urologist if you have any conditions like Peyronie's disease or erectile dysfunction. And while mild side effects like temporary numbness or skin irritation can happen, major complications are rare when the device is used properly. If you're someone who likes structure, routine, and being in control of your progress, this method could be a strong fit for you. And as Harold said to me 6 months later with a proud grin, it wasn't magic, but it worked, and I feel better knowing I did something about it. Now, while this device holds the crown for real-world results, not every tool lives up to the hype. In fact, the next method we're about to explore is widely misunderstood and often falsely believed to lengthen the penis. The truth might surprise you. Let's take a closer look. 3. Vacuum erection devices. Good for function, not length. There's something about the word pump that gives men hope. I've had many older patients walk into my office holding a vacuum erection device asking, "Will this make me bigger if I use it every day?" And I always answer them with honesty and respect, because behind that question is a deeper desire to reclaim control, to feel strong again, and to believe that something simple might restore what time has taken. Let me start by saying this. Vacuum erection devices, or VEDs, are excellent tools, but not for increasing length. What they are good at is restoring blood flow and helping men achieve and maintain erections, especially when age or medical conditions like diabetes or prostate surgery have made things more difficult. For that purpose, they're powerful, proven, and reliable. But if your goal is to lengthen the penis, you should know up front. They're not designed for that, and studies show they don't deliver that kind of result. Still, I've seen firsthand how these devices change lives, not because they alter inches, but because they restore confidence. One of my patients, Glenn, age 68, had battled with low self-esteem for years after heart surgery left him with weaker erections. He wasn't interested in pills and feared the idea of implants. But once he began using a vacuum device, everything changed. Not only did it help him regain a firm erection, but it also brought back something even more important, his sense of masculinity. He told me, "I feel like myself again. My wife noticed it and I walk a little taller now." For many older men, that's the real win. VEDs work by drawing blood into the penis through negative pressure, helping to create an erection. A constriction ring can be placed at the base to maintain the firmness during intimacy. They're easy to use, non-invasive, and safe when used properly. There's no surgery, no medication, and very few side effects aside from minor bruising or temporary discomfort. And while they won't lengthen your penis, there is one way they can support your goals indirectly, by helping to preserve penile health. Regular use of a vacuum device encourages blood flow, which can prevent tissue atrophy and keep the erectile tissue responsive. For men who are also using traction devices or undergoing other treatments, a VED can complement those efforts by maintaining vascular function. So if you're experiencing performance issues or just want to stay ahead of age-related changes, a vacuum device might be a valuable part of your toolkit. It may not add length, but it does add something just as valuable: function, confidence, and readiness. But now, we need to talk about a path that's far more risky, one that's often disguised as a quick fix, but comes with serious consequences. Many men turn to this next option hoping for fast results, and some don't realize the damage they've done until it's far too late. Let me show you why penile injections are far more dangerous than most people think. 4. Avoid all injections. The risks are too high. I wish this part didn't have to be said, but it does, loud and clear. If you've been browsing online, scrolling through forums, or watching late-night advertisements that promise to enlarge your penis with just a few quick injections, I need you to stop and listen closely. I've seen what happens when men put their trust in these shortcuts, and the outcomes are often devastating, not just physically, but emotionally and financially too. Let me share a story I'll never forget. A patient of mine, Thomas, came to see me after undergoing a girth enhancement procedure he found at a clinic abroad. He was in his early 60s, recently divorced, and feeling vulnerable. A flashy website had convinced him that a few injections could help him start fresh, feel younger, and be more confident in dating again. What he got instead was inflammation, scarring, and loss of sensation. And worst of all, when he tried to reach the provider for help, there was no one there to answer the phone. These injections often involve substances like silicone, collagen, fat, or other fillers. Some are marketed as medically safe, even natural. But here's the truth. None of these injectable procedures are FDA approved for penile enhancement, and none of them are recommended by the Sexual Medicine Society of North America or any reputable urological association. In fact, clinical studies have shown that many of these substances can migrate over time, cause painful lumps, deform the shaft, or lead to chronic infections. Some complications don't show up until years later, and by then the damage may be irreversible. Imagine doing something in search of confidence and ending up unable to perform at all. That's a reality I've seen more than once. I know the appeal of these injections. I know they're marketed as quick, simple, and discreet. For a man who's spent decades quietly worrying about his size, it can sound like the miracle answer. But I urge you, don't risk your long-term health for short-term hope. There are no shortcuts when it comes to something this delicate and this personal. You deserve better than a back alley promise or an unproven treatment. And if you've already had injections, don't panic, but do get checked. A consultation with a board-certified urologist can help assess any complications and guide you on next steps. So where does that leave us? We've now explored the non-surgical methods, therapy, traction devices, vacuum pumps, and the serious warning against injections. These are the routes that offer possibility without the knife. But for those who are still curious about surgical intervention, maybe because they've exhausted all other options or are dealing with unique circumstances, there is more to consider. What comes next is not for the faint of heart. In Section 2, we'll dive into surgical options, the good, the bad, and the downright dangerous. If you've ever wondered what really happens behind closed doors at enhancement clinics, or whether any of these surgeries are actually worth it, you won't want to miss what's coming. 1. Suspensory ligament release. Small gain, big risk. Every time a patient brings up surgery as an option for increasing penis size, I pause for a moment before answering. Not because there's nothing to say, but because it's one of the most emotionally charged decisions a man can make. At this stage in life, after 60, after decades of living, working, raising families, and going through the highs and lows of relationships, wanting to feel more confident in your body is not superficial. It's human, it's personal, and it deserves the full truth, not marketing spin. Suspensory ligament release is often presented as the go-to surgical option for men seeking added length. The procedure involves cutting the ligament that attaches the penis to the pubic bone, which allows more of the internal shaft to extend outward. On paper, it sounds logical. Free the tether, get more length, and yes, in some cases it can result in a visible increase in flaccid length. But what they don't tell you is that this gain comes at a cost. The truth is, this procedure does not increase erect length. That's one of the biggest misconceptions I see. The added length is only when the penis is soft, and even that gain is modest, often less than an inch. For some men, that may be enough, but for many others, the outcome leads to disappointment, not satisfaction. More importantly, cutting the suspensory ligament can affect the angle and stability of erections. Without that anchor to the pubic bone, the penis may no longer point upward during arousal. Instead, it may drop downward or feel less supported, making intimacy more awkward and less enjoyable. That's a detail rarely advertised, but it's a real and common outcome. I've also seen complications like scar tissue forming at the incision site, which can actually shorten the penis over time or distort its appearance. In some cases, patients are advised to wear a traction device for months after the surgery to prevent retraction, but many are never told that beforehand. I remember one patient, Leonard, who came to me after undergoing the surgery at a private clinic. He was in his late 60s, divorced and feeling isolated. He told me he was promised at least 2 inches of gain. Instead, he ended up with just under half an inch, a flatter angle during arousal, and a deep sense of regret. What hurt most, he said, wasn't the money spent or the physical discomfort, it was the emotional letdown. He thought it would fix something inside him, but it didn't. That's why I always say, if you're considering this route, go in with eyes wide open. Make sure your surgeon is board certified, experienced, and honest about outcomes. And most of all, make sure you understand what you're really hoping to achieve, because the knife can't fix what's emotional. But for those still curious, surgery doesn't stop here. There are other techniques, more complex, more invasive, and often marketed as more dramatic. But do those methods deliver what they promise, or do they leave more scars than solutions? Let's take a closer look at the next more experimental group of surgical options. What you'll learn may surprise you. 2. Tissue grafts or flaps. Experimental, often ineffective. There's something about the word surgery that carries both hope and fear. For many older men who have quietly battled insecurities for years, the idea of a more advanced surgical procedure, something that promises dramatic results through grafts or flaps, can feel like a last resort, maybe even a miracle. But before you put your trust in these techniques, I want to walk you through what they really are, what they promise, and what they often fail to deliver. Tissue graft or flap procedures involve taking material, sometimes from your own body, sometimes synthetic, and using it to add bulk or length to the penis. In theory, it sounds like reconstruction, adding where nature didn't provide enough, reshaping something that feels incomplete. But the reality is far less predictable. Most of these procedures are considered experimental, which means they haven't been standardized. They're not widely performed by board-certified urologists, and they lack long-term studies showing consistent success. The results vary wildly from one patient to the next, and sadly, so do the complications. Some techniques use fat grafts, where fat is harvested from the abdomen or thighs and injected into the penis. While this can create a temporary increase in girth, the fat is often reabsorbed by the body within months, leaving behind uneven texture or even visible lumps. Other methods use dermal grafts or even rib cartilage to try and create structure and permanence. But these more invasive techniques require longer healing, carry higher risk of infection, and in many cases simply don't achieve the natural look or function men were hoping for. I remember a gentleman named Carl who came to me for a second opinion after undergoing a graft procedure in another country. He was 66, recently retired, and had spent much of his savings on the surgery. What he hoped would give him a new sense of confidence left him feeling disfigured and withdrawn. He said to me, "I went in hoping to gain an inch. I came out feeling like I'd lost a piece of myself." That's a sentence I'll never forget. The biggest issue with these surgeries is not just the physical risk, it's the emotional toll of unmet expectations. These are not quick procedures. They come with real pain, long recovery periods, and the haunting possibility that things may look or feel worse than before. And for older men, recovery can be slower, more complicated, and more isolating. So yes, tissue grafts and flap procedures exist, but they are rarely recommended by mainstream medical institutions for cosmetic enhancement. Unless you're part of a clinical trial or dealing with a specific medical condition such as traumatic injury or cancer-related reconstruction, these procedures often leave more scars than solutions. But believe it or not, there's still one more surgical path worth discussing, one that isn't advertised on flashy websites, but one that could offer a safer route for those determined to try. It's not easy to access, and it's held to much higher standards. So what is it? And could it be the only truly responsible way to explore surgical enhancement? Let's find out. 3. Clinical trials, the only responsible surgical path. When it comes to surgical enhancement, most men are looking for two things: real results and real safety. But the sad truth is, many of the procedures advertised today, especially online or overseas, promise far more than they can safely deliver. That's why if you're seriously considering surgery to increase penile length, there's only one path I can recommend with a clear conscience: participating in a clinical trial. Now, I know the word trial might sound intimidating. For some, it conjures up images of being experimented on or not knowing what you're signing up for. But in reality, a clinical trial, when run by a reputable institution, offers something most private enhancement clinics can't: transparency, oversight, and honest accountability. In a clinical trial, everything is monitored by an IRB, or Institutional Review Board. This is a panel of doctors, ethicists, and researchers who make sure that every patient enrolled is treated ethically, that procedures are safe, and that any side effects or complications are tracked and reported in detail. You're not walking into the unknown. You're stepping into a carefully designed, highly supervised medical environment where your well-being comes first, not profit. And while the options within these trials may be limited, the advantage is huge. You're getting access to cutting-edge techniques, often performed by some of the top surgeons in the field, all while being part of something that could help shape the future of men's health. It's not about being a test subject, it's about being part of medical progress. One patient I'll never forget was Martin, 71 years old, widowed, and still full of quiet pride. He didn't want gimmicks, he wanted answers. After researching on his own, he enrolled in a university-run clinical trial exploring a new lengthening technique using bioengineered tissue scaffolds. The process was slow, the screening was strict, and the expectations were realistic. But most importantly, Martin knew that every step was being documented, studied, and reviewed, not just for him, but for other men who might benefit down the road. His results weren't dramatic, but they were real. Just under an inch of gain, no loss of function, and as he put it, a new sense of hope. He told me afterward, what mattered most was that I was part of something honest, that I wasn't lied to. Clinical trials don't guarantee success. They aren't easy to find, and they're not a fast track to transformation. But for men who are truly committed to this path, they offer the most ethical and medically sound way forward. That brings us to the end of our journey through surgical options. And now it's time to step back and reflect. With so many choices, some safe, others risky, how do you decide what's right for you? In our final section, we'll tie everything together with a deeper look at self-worth, aging, and the one overlooked factor that matters more than any measurement. Stay with me. This final message is something every man over 60 deserves to hear. Final reflection. What really matters beyond the numbers. After all we've covered, non-surgical techniques, risky procedures, scientific studies, personal stories, it's time we step back and ask the question that truly matters. Why do so many men still care so deeply about size, especially later in life? The answer isn't always about sex. For many, it's about identity. It's about feeling like we still matter, that we're still strong, still capable, still connected, to our partners, to ourselves, and to the man we've always seen in the mirror. At this stage in life, that desire to feel whole again, to feel enough, can be as powerful as ever. But what I hope you've taken from everything we've explored is this: your worth is not measured in inches. It never has been. And while science has offered us some tools, some paths, some carefully studied possibilities for change, those changes mean very little if you don't first believe in your own value. I've met men who gained half an inch and felt transformed. Not because the size made all the difference, but because the act of doing something for themselves reignited their sense of control, purpose, and dignity. I've also met men who underwent surgery only to feel more broken afterward because what they were really chasing wasn't physical, it was emotional healing. And no scalpel can give you that. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who's thoughtful, curious, and committed to bettering yourself. That alone puts you in rare company. Most people are too embarrassed to even ask the questions you've been brave enough to confront, and that courage, that willingness to face something so personal, deserves to be acknowledged and respected. So where do you go from here? Start by being honest with yourself. What do you really want? Is it a number? Or is it to feel desirable again, confident again, alive again? If it's the latter, and for most men it is, then I encourage you to begin with the methods that build not just physical change, but emotional strength. For some, that means finally talking to someone, a therapist, a doctor, a partner. For others, it might mean committing to a safe, non-surgical method like traction therapy and being consistent with it over time. And for a few, it may mean exploring clinical trials, not out of desperation, but with eyes open and expectations grounded in reality. But no matter what you choose, do it from a place of respect for yourself. Don't chase perfection, don't buy into fear, and don't fall for anyone who makes you feel like you're not enough unless you fix yourself. You are already enough. And anything you choose to pursue from here should simply be a bonus, not a requirement to feel whole. One of the greatest lessons I've learned from my older patients is that the men who age well aren't the ones who fight every wrinkle or every change. They're the ones who learn to adapt with grace, with courage, and with clarity about what truly matters. They don't waste energy comparing themselves to unrealistic ideals. Instead, they invest in real connections, real health, and real purpose. And isn't that what we all want in the end? Not just a better body, but a better relationship with ourselves. You've spent your life giving to others, showing up, working hard, pushing through pain. Now it's time to give something back to you. Whether it's confidence, comfort, or clarity, it starts with honoring your story, flaws, fears, and all, and moving forward from a place of strength. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being the kind of man who doesn't run from the hard questions, but seeks answers with courage. If this video gave you a new perspective or helped you feel seen, I hope you'll share it. Because there are countless other men out there, men just like you, who are still sitting in silence wondering if they're alone. They're not. And now neither are you.